Hey everyone, it's been a while. I'm Jake, and welcome to the third devlog for my Metroidvania game. After spending like 700 years adding all of the art into the cave area, I'm happy to say that most of the environmental art is in and looking pretty good. I populated the level with spider enemies that simply patrol left and right and shoot a web shot at the player while in range. I also spent a week creating one of the first bosses of the game, but I don't want to spoil it for you, so you'll have to wait for the jam version of the game to be out to see it. With that all out of the way, I began overhauling the dialogue system. The dialogue system I'd created previously I programmed in about 10 minutes, and it was pretty rough to say the least. I scrapped all of the code that I had and started from scratch. After setting up the UI, I started rewriting the typewriter effect. I pretty much just created a coroutine that would get the string of text that was going to be displayed on the screen, got each character from said string, and then over a period of time display each character one at a time. I then started getting actual dialogue to display on the screen. I opted in to use scriptable objects for this. In theory, I'd be able to create a scriptable object with a string, and then pass that object into the dialogue manager. For what it was, it worked pretty well, but in hindsight, it wasn't too good of an idea, but I'll get to that in a bit. With a heavy focus on environmental storytelling as well as learning about the world's lore through NPC interaction, the next logical step was to add some sort of response system. This would also allow for potential branching dialogue and have different things in the world happen depending on which dialogue branch the player takes. In the dialogue object scriptable, I created an array of potential responses which would then take in their own dialogue scriptable object. I set up some UI that would dynamically create buttons for each response, and once the button was pressed, that would then call the dialogue to be displayed. It was at this point I could slowly start to see how messy things could get with linking dialogue objects in responses, but I powered through it anyway. With everything going well, I started to implement Unity events to the responses. The thought behind this was I could trigger different events to occur depending on the player's chosen response. This could be something like setting a boss game object to active or opening a door which would have stayed closed if the player didn't speak to that particular NPC. This took a lot of time and research considering I had never used Unity events in this way before, and to my surprise, it ended up working. Sort of. I kept running into the issue of the response events only working about 50% of the time. With no errors in the console, and after following many different tutorials, I decided to switch gears a little bit and start planning out some of the dialogue between the player and the first NPC. For this, I used a flowchart tool online to rough out all of the dialogue and responses, and once I was done, I could just create a bunch of scriptable objects with all the dialogue and responses and link them all in the scuffed system that I'd created. And that's when I had the realization. I could spend another week or so learning how to create a node-based editor for myself in Unity to speed up the process in the long run, or I could have a look at some dialogue system tools on the asset store. And that's exactly what I did. After some browsing, I came across the dialogue system for Unity by Pixel Crushers, which seemed to have a lot of great reviews, but a chunky price tag attached. Luckily, they had a free version of the asset that you could try before you buy, which is exactly what I did. I imported the asset, watched a few of their tutorials, and created a dialogue tree in Unity as well as tweaked the UI to better suit the look I was after. And this was the end result. I'm super happy that I stumbled across this asset, and even though it was a little bit pricey, it's going to save me a lot of time in the future considering there will be many NPCs to talk to and interact with. But that's all for this video. If you want to check out the dialogue system asset, I'll leave a link to the store page as well as the tutorial playlist in the description below. I also want to mention quickly that I'm not too sure when the next devlog will be out. As I mentioned in an earlier devlog, I'm making this game for the Super Metroidvania Month Game Jam, and at the time of recording this, I have about a month and a half to go. So I want to put my head down and get to work, so I can have something playable for those interested by the deadline. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you have any feedback or suggestions as to what I should do next, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.